Hello, we meet again. I hope that everyone is doing okay this week and finding lots of ways to take care of each other in real life and online. Today, we are mostly going to talk about Chapter 13 and how to deliver a speech confidently. And I know that this is a real point of anxiety for many of us, but there will be a couple things that take the edge off, and we'll talk about all of them today. One of them is that you get to do it video recording. You don't have to stand up in front of a room. You will have to see yourself on the screen and watch it to make sure it's fine. You might even practice on video. But at least you don't literally have to be up in front of an entire classroom presenting your information. Even though the next time that you have to do that, or lead a meeting or present a proposal or anything of this variety, hopefully these tips will help it go smoothly. Especially for those of us that are introverts. It's okay. This doesn't have to be your favorite thing. We don't have to love presenting. We don't have to be recharged or energized by presenting. But we will find ways to make it tolerable at the very least, and hopefully enjoyable to at least get our really cool information across. So, your book covers some styles of delivery. One of them is impromptu. And impromptu just means off the cuff, unexpected. You weren't planning on talking about anything. And this tends to be something that clearly was unplanned, and that most of us only like to do in our topic area. But the key to this style is if you get surprised, if your boss calls on you in a meeting and you didn't know you were going to have to give this impromptu presentation, first what you have to do is don't panic. Don't panic. If you are asked to talk about something, chances are you do know it pretty well. Rarely do we get asked to speak on something that we don't know very well. Or we have an opportunity to rephrase it just a little bit so that it is completely on our topic. If somebody said, hey, Sarah's really great talking about large cats. So if you could tell us some things about large cats right now in this work meeting, that would be great. And you panic and you think, I don't know about large cats. I only know about lions. Then you could take that moment to take a deep breath and not panic and say, well, why don't I tell you what I know about lions, which are my favorite topic. And then you proceed to find, after you're not panicking and after you reframe it so that you can answer it, pick 3 points. Pick 3 points about the topic that you know well and back them up with support, more of that points and support organization, even when it's a surprise, and make it relevant to the question that you reframed that you can answer, and keep it relatively brief. Unless you're being asked to speak because you need to be a time delay. And in that case, see if you can sidetrack everybody into your favorite topic while your boss has time to repair the technology connection so that the meeting can continue on speakerphone. If you need to be distracting everyone, feel free to not make it brief. Another type of speech that is relatively common, or presentation, is extemporaneous. That means that you pretend that it's spontaneous. Not to the point that you lie and say, this is completely spontaneous, even though you have it memorized. No. Extemporaneous just means that you make it seem rather spontaneous, that you're not reading something directly word for word. There's no teleprompter. You haven't memorized something. You maybe have, as we are going to have in this class, an outline or some slides or some bullet points, and you know enough about each of those topics and supports or slides or images or sources that as you go through something that you have very prepared, you're still speaking in a fluid manner that doesn't imply that every preposition and verb and noun was already locked into place, either in your mind or in paper. And this is the one that we will probably mostly be using instead of scripted. Scripted is word for word, reading off a teleprompter or a page. And memorized is, of course, just word for word out of your head. Instead, and most times in life, when you're asked to speak, you'll do extemporaneous. because it makes us sound quite robotic and like we're not engaging with our audience if we do it either memorized, scripted, or impromptu. Looks like we didn't prepare and we won't have enough facts. So mostly what you want to aim for in life is this extemporaneous that remains a little bit flexible, but you know your materials well enough that you've got the sources and can talk about them. You've got the support for every point and can talk about it. That you can answer questions and talk about it a little bit. That you have a basic outline of solid information that you know and understand, but you haven't done word for word preparation. It's okay to practice. It's not that you shouldn't practice trying out all of the words you could say. It's just that you remain a little bit more fluid and you're not reading off of paper or a teleprompter and you haven't memorized exactly every single word that you want to say, because that would be rather awkward and would tend to imply to the audience that you didn't know your materials very well. Often when you know your materials well enough, it's rather easy to be extemporaneous and just look down at your bullet points and your little phrases and reminders and your outline and speak about them because you know your information so well. Which brings us to something else that the book would like to emphasize, which is presentation aids and why. Why do we use any materials? Why do I give you my notes? Not just because they are roughly a closed caption of my videos, but why do I also give you YouTube links or links to documentation? There have been a couple of studies that we linked to, or images or graphs or charts. Or why do some people put a slide up with bullet points on it, such as PowerPoint or any of the online slide makers? This tends to be because when presenting, it's something on which to focus, both for the speaker and for the audience, which means that the speaker can be referring to a presentation aid, a handout, their slide presentation, an image that is one of their primary resources, an image of something happening that relates to their topic. It gives them something to focus on and follow, and it gives the audience something to focus on and follow. When we have no props, we tend to get distracted easily. I have a prop right now. It's my laptop that I'm speaking into. So I can gesture wildly at my laptop and engage, even though it's an object. It gives me something to focus on, rather than if there was nothing here, I would immediately look for something else to focus on and I would get distracted by something over here or something over there. So it gives the presenter something to focus on and it gives the audience something to focus on. Often when you're listening, your laptop is providing the same function, or your computer or your phone or tablet or whatever you're listening on. It's something with which to engage. And if there was nothing in front of you, you would find something on which to focus and engage. Right? So we try to make those materials part of the presentation instead of giving them nothing and having a room of everybody looking around for something else to focus on. Materials are also a really great memory aid, again, for both the presenter and the audience. Instead of having note cards or a sheet of paper with an outline, some presenters love to just make their slides with bullet points or images or studies or graphs, make that their outline. That as they click through, that prompts their memory of what they should be talking about next. It also improves the memory of the audience. Audience recall is almost always better if we give a visual. If there is a image to look at, a graph to look at, some notes drawn on the board, a page in the book that we can flip through together, notes for a video lecture, something that we can latch onto. This also applies to taking notes. Taking notes often counts as a visual aid for memory for anyone listening to a presentation. And not because we can refer to exactly what we wrote down, though that's obviously a perk, but because the act of taking our hand and our eyeballs and our brains and putting them to paper and creating that visual decreases the chances that we'll even have to look at those notes to remember it. So we give ourselves a backup source of information, and it entrenches in our memory the information so that we may not even have to look at our backup. So presentation materials are a great memory aid. They're really great for understanding. When someone was talking about the evolution of fashion before World War II, during World War II, and after World War II, she explained some cool things to us about shoulder pads and A-lines and waistlines and halter tops, and even those of us who knew what most of the terms were couldn't really picture it. So if we are talking about something that is really new to each other, or that is new to most of us, or that is really, really complex and has many pieces, those materials become a really great understanding aid. That they aren't just something to focus on, they don't just help our memory, but they help us understand what the information means in the first place. So feel free to incorporate graphs and images that support your materials. I rarely have any images that support. I have lots of videos that support, you may have noticed. But hopefully that in addition to a teacher rambling, because I don't have access to a marker board to give you some illustrations of understanding aids, I rely largely on online resources to improve our understanding, and the book, and occasionally an image or two. And then almost anything can act as these for whatever your primary resources are. A student who is talking about reflexes and visual spatial skills and hand-eye coordination brought us tennis balls and made us do some exercises and stand up and see if we could drop a tennis ball directly onto our foot, etc. And that did the same thing. It gave us something to focus on. It was a memory aid. It helped our understanding of how difficult it is to actually line up hand-foot coordination, etc. And then there's some other things that presentation aids can do, and that is provide sensory feedback. All 5 of our senses are involved in memory and understanding. So again, with the tennis ball, that would involve some more kinesthetics and some touch and things that can stick really cool information to our brains better than just looking at a flat screen. It's going to be difficult for us to do some of these. Because we aren't physically in a room together. In creative writing classes, it's not uncommon to have a smell prompt or a texture prompt where there's a bag, a canvas bag that no one can see inside of, and you reach inside and touch an action figure and have to use that as your character for the story you're writing. These things won't be as applicable to us because we really only have sight and hearing relative to each other. Though you could absolutely make us stand up with a tennis ball or something really common that we might all have access to. But if you find a way to incorporate our senses as a teaching material, please do. That would be amazing. And this always has to be chosen based on context. If you had a lecture hall full of 300 people, you wouldn't give them all a tennis ball. If you had a meeting full of really, really fancily dressed people, you might not make them do a hands-on chemistry experiment. You just always pick based on context. And then the next thing, now that we know why we have to use presentation aids and some styles of speech, and that ours will be largely extemporaneous, we can maybe begin to cover the nervousness aspect of presentations. Once you've determined which style of presentation you're going to use and what your topic's going to be and what your materials are going to be, then we get to the nervous part where, oh no, I actually have to stand up there and do this, or oh no, I actually have to hit record. I have to see my own face recording a video. And believe me, it often seems extremely ridiculous. I often feel very ridiculous sitting in my office talking to myself. I am so used to leading discussions and engaging with everyone in a classroom that it is a big leap to try to imagine that we are all engaging in this material together via video. So how do we do that? How do we get up in front of the lecture hall, speak in front of our bosses, or convince ourselves to hit record on the video? Well, it's going to involve overcoming our anxiety. Anxiety is a super, super common stressor. It's just everywhere. For some of us more than others, I'm definitely one of those. I'm very tuned in to anxiety. It's really common. It can be caused by virtually anything. It is largely anticipatory. There are some emotions and feelings that we have that only happen during an event or after an event. You know, like sadness, for example, is typically after an event. It's hard to feel sad if nothing has happened. And that's not to say our brain chemistry doesn't give us some anxiety and sadness or elation without a direct correlation to our physical environment. Many of us know that our brain chemistry can toss these at us without reason. But anxiety and stress are largely anticipatory. That means that they usually happen before an event, that we physically and emotionally experience these right before something happens, that we think something is going to happen. And what we physically tend to present when we're feeling anxiety before something happens is that we anticipate that something is going to happen, and it changes our voice. It gets really high or can get really low. Something changes. Our volume changes. We get really quiet. We get really loud. It changes our voice and all of the musculature in our throat. It tends to affect our mouth. It can get dry. We'll start slurring or stuttering. The musculature isn't going quite right. Our facial expressions change, and we might get giant nervous eyes, or we blush or go white and ashen. Our movements change. A lot of people fidget like this. Some of us freeze like this, but the movement changes somehow. Our verbal ability to even think of what we're trying to get our mouth to process for us decreases. And what all of this is fight or flight. Many of us have used fight or flight in other contexts. If there's a car crash and someone can lift a really heavy car, it's because they went into fight or flight and they, had adrenaline rush that let them lift a car off a person. Or something actually life-threatening and very physical. But fight or flight happens very, very much for things that are not physical experiences. So even though many of us are quite familiar with this topic, we are going to watch 2 videos that introduce it a little bit better, because I can't animate things for you, and I can't draw things on the board for you, and I can't ask you questions and hear your answers. We're going to rely on a learning material that is visual and silly to help us remember what fight or flight is. So pause me, watch the one that is fight or flight basics, and then there's one about why we get nervous that we'll talk more about our amygdala. So pause me for just a moment and go watch those, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about how to stay out of fight or flight. Welcome back. I hope that those cartoon cavemen and cartoon drawings of our brains helped a bit, and explained why our bodies see a threat, like a speech or an unexpected request for a speech or a speech that we haven't prepared very well, and we respond to that anxiety the exact same way. Our anxiety is the exact same as it would be for a saber-toothed tiger. Right? There is no saber-toothed tiger stalking us. But if there was, we would need all of the blood to rush to our muscles and not be in our stomachs and not be in our cerebral cortex. We would need just our primal amygdalas to take over, deal with some reflexes and stressors, and we wouldn't really be singing the alphabet or anything a higher function. We would want to be just at those primal things, right? And it makes sense why some of us would freeze. Maybe the saber-toothed tiger didn't see me. Or start to fidget. I'm super ready to go. The adrenaline is telling me it's time to go. So these physiological responses evolved to keep us safe from saber-toothed tigers. Unfortunately, we have the same experience with stage fright, that we, in our bodies, react the same way to the stage or the video camera or the spider that we do for a saber-toothed tiger. So part of how we cope with this is that we just recognize it. We recognize that this is fight or flight, and we can even pause and chuckle to ourselves and be like, That's not a saber-toothed tiger. Why do I feel like it's a saber-toothed tiger? I think I'm gonna barf, but there's no saber-toothed tiger. And then once we realize that, we can go through these steps to help us get over it. So once you hear that a presentation is assigned, the first thing that you can do to help yourself stay out of fight or flight in the first place is to prepare. Is to, when you're requested to make a brainstorm, when you're requested to make an outline and find primary sources and use really awesome transition words, do that. Do that. It is really hard to be nervous when you know all your materials. When you know your stuff, there is nothing that will surprise you. There's nothing left that you don't understand, or much less. It's really hard to have anxiety about presenting when you know things inside and out. So prepare. Preparing your materials with awesome sources in a really great outline and feeling organized and confident in your information is a really solid way to not later get into fight or flight. And if you start to go into fight or flight, you can go, what am I scared of? I know this inside and out. I'm going to be fine. So prepare your materials. The other thing is to practice. And it feels really silly, as I have mentioned, as I am feeling right now, talking to my laptop. It feels very silly to practice, but do it. Talk to a mirror, or just sit on the couch with your note cards saying the words out loud. Start to build some muscle memory of what it's going to feel like to use your voice on your topic. Try it out on friends or family. And once these words have already been out of your mouth, not exactly, not memorized, but once you've tried this on with some physicality, with some physical practice, it is much easier to rely on those physical experiences when your amygdala tries to take over. Because what is your amygdala very good at? Things like muscle memory and primal emotions. So if you have already started to insert some of your practice and physical preparation into places that you can access even if fight or flight starts, you'll be in a good spot. And another thing about practice is that, especially for those of us who hate it, something that unfortunately happens is that our fight or flight decreases over time. If we experience fight or flight and then also give a really great speech after having been in fight or flight, our system goes, oh, yeah, I'm not sure I needed to trigger like full-on saber-toothed tiger for that. And the only way to get there so that your system starts to recognize that the fight or flight wasn't valid for presenting is to present through your fight or flight repeatedly. Practice makes perfect. Practice your speech ahead of time, and then practice giving presentations even when you don't want to. It will physically help your system recognize that there was no saber-toothed tiger, and the next time you present, you'll experience less fight or flight. The other thing that you can do to help your brain recognize that the presentation you're about to give is not actually a saber-toothed tiger is to picture it, to not just practice in front of a mirror or a video, but to actually practice in the location or visualize practicing in the location. Olympic divers don't very often get a chance to do tons of practice on the platform that they're going to jump off of for gold, silver, and bronze. They typically have to just envision themselves. They have to picture themselves in the spot where fight or flight could occur. The same thing works for speeches. If you know the boardroom, if you know your desk, if you know whatever location your anxiety-producing situation is going to be located in, imagine yourself there. Practice out loud and practice in your mind, envisioning yourself in that location, because then you know that it's not a saber-toothed tiger, right? There is no saber-toothed tiger. There might be bright lights that feel really hot and you can't see the audience well. There could be a video camera that you feel silly about. There could be a superior that stresses you out. Still not a saber-toothed tiger. So picture yourself doing well in front of those things that will not literally bite you. The other thing is you can practice yourself having success, right? Is picture yourself not just having success in the future room where you're going to present, but remember emotionally. See if you can trigger the emotions of a time that you succeeded in the past. Some time that you succeeded really well, and see if you can bring up those emotions. Because we would rather have those awesome success emotions going than we would the fight or flight. We would rather get rid of the anxiety and replace it with something more upbeat. So see if you can physically recall some of the emotions and how those helped your body feel rather than how fight or flight tries to make your body feel. And then suddenly your cerebral cortex will re-engage, your amygdala quiets down, and you can start engaging with the material that you have really well prepared. There are some other things that we can do to reduce amygdala hijack. Amygdala hijack from the first fight or flight videos is really stunningly similar. And some people who tend to be really good at this are athletes. So we'll watch another video about reducing amygdala hijack, that little teeny tiny part of your brain that does lots of muscle memory and does lots of primal emotions. Go watch that, come right on back, and we'll keep going. Welcome back. So amygdala hijack, right? So now that we can recognize our amygdala, now that we see our amygdala and fight or flight, and now that we know there's no saber-toothed tiger, we can start to get out of our amygdala. One of the best ways to do this, and anyone who has lots of practice with anxiety knows this, is that even above preparation and visualization and trying it over and over again until our response decreases, is that if we do find ourselves in a place where fight or flight is happening, we know there's no saber-toothed tiger, but our system doesn't recognize it. Our system is not buying what we are selling. It is terrified, mouth is going dry, words are shutting down, feeling nervous in the tummy, cold sweats, fidgeting, everything else, right? One of the surefire ways to shut this down is breathing. That increased breathing rate that you would need when a saber-toothed tiger was chasing you, you do not need, does not help you give a speech. So take a deep breath. It feels ridiculous. And when you actually are experiencing anxiety, it will feel like you tried to breathe in for 30 minutes and then back out for 30 minutes and like you're starving your system of oxygen. But the opposite is what's happening, is both that you are providing your system with more oxygen that it can give to your cerebral cortex so you can think again. But because panic and anxiety are such physical processes, if you can shut down your lungs, force them to be calm and cool and collected, the rest of your system will follow. Breathing will actually shut down the physiological steps of fight or flight and bring your cerebral cortex back online, both with a sequence of what follows the next and with extra oxygen. So breathing is super key. So watch the video about breathing and then come right on back and we'll talk again. Okay, so welcome back. So breathing, super key, and it's one of the easiest to think of. Well before our cerebral cortex comes back online, before we can think again, we can focus on our lungs. So always try that, focus on your lungs. Something else that we can do, if we can get a little bit past our lungs, if we are just enough out of fight or flight to sense that we're getting a little bit nervous, but it's maybe not full blown yet, we're not needing to hyperventilate or breathe into a paper bag, is posture. Is that not just how you're feeling affects your posture, but that your posture affects how you're feeling. Just like breathing. It's not just that your breathing speeds up when you feel nervous, it's that breathing slowly shuts down being nervous. Your posture can shut down all of those voices in the back of your head that say you can't do things and increase your confidence. It seems silly, but it's 100% true, and it's relatively easy to do in a classroom, before you go into an interview, sitting in your car, before you go somewhere, in a waiting room. These are places that you can do the postures that will actually change your state of mind. So breathing and posture. So watch the video about posture that is from Amy Cuddy. And it's a TED Talk, and she is lovely. And oh my goodness, everyone, posture. It's going to feel silly, but it's worth it. Go watch the video. Okay, welcome back. The other thing is that you can stay positive in the face of non-perfection, right? Let's say that we breathe successfully, we're prepared amazingly, we visualized everything, we've got awesome posture, our cerebral cortex is mostly online for our higher level thinking, and then we still stutter something, or our mouth is still a little bit dry, or we tip over the water that we brought to make our mouth less dry. That's okay. Just anticipate that it's not going to be 100% perfect. Or redefine your idea of perfect to include a couple of silly mistakes that humanize us and make us more relatable. That's okay. There has never been a speech with no errors, a presentation with no flubs. Perfect just includes a few, not a ton, a few little slips. And staying positive if there are more than that. Just be like, well, worst case scenario, I'm going to have less fight or flight next time because I'm showing my system that I'm not being eaten by a saber-toothed tiger right now, right? So reframe it to stay positive. That will really, truly work. And then the other thing that we can always do that decreases anxiety, that really shuts down those stress hormones, the stress hormones often being cortisol, adrenaline, and testosterone, both genders, that we can manipulate those, not just with breathing and posture in the moment, but that we can set our brains and physiologies and bodies a better baseline if we're doing things like eating and sleeping and exercising in really healthy ways. Not going overboard so that our mental health suffers because we're obsessing about being healthy, but just enough that we are, getting some fresh air, getting some physical movement, getting plenty of vitamins and minerals, and plenty of water, and resting enough, right? We can go overboard with this, but if we want to give ourselves a healthy stress level for hormones that physically trigger these things in our body, like adrenaline or cortisol, relatively moderate, healthy habits help. They actually set us up for less fight or flight. So the physical signs of success in which to engage that actually help us to not have just visualized and prepared, but in the moment carry through, are all the things that we just talked about. It's breathing. It is knowing ahead of time what you're going to wear for interviews. Know you're going to have to dress up, know your route. That's part of preparing, is prepare what you're going to wear. If it's a video call, make sure that you're not wearing completely your pajamas. Relax your face. This is just like with the breathing and the postures, is that if we feel ourselves holding tension right here, or if we feel ourselves holding tension in our neck, or if we're clutching or grinding, just like breathing and the confident postures, our body, if we can make our body relax and notice where we're holding that tension and let it go, it convinces our other systems to come back online where we want them to be. So in case I haven't said that enough, you physically have a relationship with your brain and your lungs and your muscles that if you force your physiological systems to let go of the tension, your higher thinking systems will come right back online. Okay, you can actually make that happen. Eye contact or faux eye contact, include that in your visualization. If you know that if you can successfully make eye contact or glance at someone's shoulder or the center of their table and at least make sure that you're glancing at everyone or occasionally glancing at the camera, which is hard to do. We technically, we try to look at our information as well. But if you can visualize yourself being successful in making enough eye contact, If you start to make eye contact or faux eye contact with a video camera, and that was part of your success plan, you will start to feel the success, right? Gestures that match your intent. That's why we physically practice. It's not just for our voice, but so that we practice using the posture and the gestures that we want to do. Or for some of us who have done this enough now, we just constantly make fun of ourselves for always gesturing. And I think maybe I should sit on my hands. I should practice sitting on my hands instead of making gestures. But you won't get to that point until you've had to present a lot of times. Rate of speech. I am guilty of this all the time. I am a Gemini. I am super verbal. I get super excited, or if I get super nervous, either way, my speech speeds up. Or some people freeze and slow down. So whatever your personal tendency is, just got to figure out what your personal tendency is and try to counteract it. It's hard. It's tough. Even talking to my video camera, I get excited about you learning new information and engaging about it, and I'm imagining us engaging, and I get excited. My voice goes faster. Lifelong struggle. Everybody's got something. Redefine success. Keep it positive. Notice your own tendencies. Try to breathe through them. There is a little bit more about 3 tips for confident speaking in this video, and they are to prepare, including visualizing, right? So have all your materials physically, emotionally prepare for giving your presentation. The physicality includes stopping fight or flight, right? So once you've prepared all of your amazing materials, then pay attention to your body, shut down the panic responses and anxiety, turn on the higher functioning systems, and then pander is one of the P's that they include in this video. And that just means to be mindful. Be mindful of the culture, of the mood, etc. So go watch that and come right back and we'll conclude. And then you can go practice staying out of fight or flight. Okay. So ultimately, with those 3 P's and everything else we talked about, what you need to be able to do is to find a way to be able to be prepared enough, vulnerable enough, silly enough, confident enough, informed enough, whatever adjectives it takes you to be, focused on your idea with enthusiasm and curiosity. Pick a topic that you do want to talk about, or dive deeply enough into your field that when you get called on, you're prepared, you're ready, you know the information. Remind yourself to breathe, right? If you know you're going to have a dry mouth and you want to use water as an excuse to take that pause, do it. And if you spill the water, say la vie, redefine success, stay positive. And I will leave you with TED public speaking secrets. It kind of just incorporates everything we already went over. Be prepared, get your body out of fight or flight, and be enthusiastic, be yourself. Part of your personality should shine through. They're all good ways that you're going to be successful, and I can't wait to see your presentations because I think you can do it, especially for a video camera as practice for knowing that there's no saber-toothed tiger when you're presenting. If we can master it via video camera, it will be, that much easier to use our voices in rooms full of people, because we know that there's no actual saber-toothed tiger and that it's our bodies tricking us. We do not need more blood in our muscles and less oxygen in our cerebral cortex. Now that we know that, we can go do it. So I hope that you are having a great week, and I will see you out there on the message boards.